Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Ginge and Pedro Show, episode 31. I am, of course, Mr. Ginge Gingerton. Alongside me today is my boy Pedro Ang.
How are
Pedro,
you
good
doing,
morning.
guys? And say hi to my mom. She is cooking for me today. So hooray for me. How are you
All
guys
right,
doing today?
got some of that good home. Do y'all have good Southern cooking? We what is it we call it down here? I forget what we even call it. A good home cooked Southern meal. You're further
Yeah,
south than I am even. What do
yeah,
you guys call it?
we have a good without the southern element, but yeah, it's good cook. I guess Caribbean. Yeah, that's the thing.
Okay.
Like, if you go through Mexico all the way to Costa Rica, food looks like particularly the same. Like a lot of like tortilla flours, tacos, that kind of stuff. It changes names, but it's very, very similar. But when you come
Hmm.
to Panama, it's more like Caribbean cooking. So
Interesting. Lots of
yeah,
jerked chicken.
yeah, exactly. Jerk chicken, lots of
Very nice.
stews,
Right on.
seafood, all that stuff, all that good stuff.
Okay. Well, all right. Well, that was an interesting little tidbit there. Thank you,
Mhm.
Pedro. So we have also along with us today a very interesting guest, Mr. Ara. I'm going to pronounce his last name wrong, so let's just have him do it. Ara,
Yes.
which
Hello.
how do we say
Summer.
your last name, bro? I'm
Oh,
so sorry.
it's Gelenian,
Gelenian. Very
but yeah,
nice.
I respond to "Hey you," so it's it's
Hey,
either,
you.
either way. So,
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us. No, thanks for joining us, Ara. You have a really interesting project that I think it's a little more business oriented than we've had on the show before, which I think is almost kind of like a nice turn of pace. I remember waking up this morning and the gears turning a little differently in my brain, like just
Mm.
getting into a new concept, getting to learn a little bit. Let's pop into the chat real quick. I see
Yeah.
some familiar faces. We got Past Master Dan
hey,
saying ahoy. Ashen Jackal. So Ashen here,
So
I put
passion.
up a poll. I haven't done polls before, but I did a poll. I forget what it was exactly. I think it was like, do you still see comic conventions as a viable means to selling comics? And there was yes, no, and it's nuanced. Ashton here says, I don't really think so as an overall business strategy. I know a lot of comic creators who attend them and often come back short. I think it's because comics buyers don't attend like before.
Hmm.
However, if you're doing it just to get the word out to a different audience and have fun, then it might be worth probably taking a loss. Yeah. Okay. That being said, you cannot beat an audience online and having conversation every time you stream. Yes, I think, dude, like panel discussions like this, just being able to do it online, while
Yeah.
maybe not quite as fun as getting to bump shoulders, it's certainly a lot easier and a lot cheaper and is a lot more consistent. So, also, Sugar Chris, good morning, buddy.
Top sugar.
hey, Chris.
Whew, boy, I just talked a lot. I'm out of breath. All right.
Hey, you did. You did. I'm really proud of you, man.
Thank you, Pedro.
That
So,
was
Ara,
Yes.
your project, we're kind of beating around the bush here. It's the Comic Con Video Handbook.
Yes.
Did I say that right? Okay, very
Yes, you did.
nice.
Yep.
Let's just kind of take it from the top. What were your inspirations as a kid? Obviously, you're a filmmaker. That's what this project is. It's a documentary about how to film Comic Cons. So you must be a comic book fan. When did you get into comics? What were some of the ones that really stuck you as a kid?
Well, it started like kind of like the superhero thing. Started when I was a young kid, like the Disney and Archie stuff. I still remember like third, fourth grade, like early to mid '80s. I brought an Archie comic book in for show and tell, and
oh nice.
that was like what almost 40 years ago now. So that's
Nice.
that's how much it stuck with me. So it was like Disney and Archie stuff, and then like late elementary school. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, so it was during the original Marvel run of Star Wars. I was getting,
Hmm.
my parents would buy me Star Wars stuff it was all off the spinner racks in like
Very
convenience
nice.
stores and supermarkets. So I don't think we knew about comic book shops. I'm in Massachusetts, and there's a shop in Cambridge that's been around, I think, since the '70s. So, but I don't think we knew about that store. So it was mostly off spinner racks. So we went from Archie and Disney stuff to Avengers, Defenders, Star Wars, GI Joe. Those are kind of like the big four that were kind of like and it was just I think it was the whole in general storytelling thing has always been captivating to me. Like telling a story, whether it's a fictional story or it's like a historical thing. So it was just that captivating. Like wow, this is great. And I always loved like superhero stuff. As far as early on, I always loved groups more than like. I mean, I had like single issues of Iron Man, Superman, Batman, things like that. A couple of Wonder Woman issues, but for some reason, it was always like groups were more like, big with me, like Avengers, Defenders. That whole idea of like
Assemble.
bringing like big, like people who were big on their own, like together. And I remember when, like in the real world, I guess with music, when We Are the World came out in 1985, I was like 11, but I still like kind of knew generally like a lot of the singers, and I thought that was like the best thing ever, because you got all these like big singers like Dylan,
Got Hall and Oates, man.
yeah. So
dude.
that was always a fascinating thing to me too. I'm like, I've always, so Avengers, Defenders, GI Joe, Star Wars, that got me started in comic books, and then both my parents loved movies. They loved different kinds of movies, but my dad always loved the behind the scenes stuff. He was a history professor for about 4 decades, but he was also a carpenter and loved like the behind the scenes thing. But also how he loved how things are made, like anything. So he was always building like bookshelves and stuff. And then I got into that, and we would always drive around, and any construction site we'd see, he'd always be like, "Oh, I wonder what they're doing there. I wonder what." So I think that subconsciously kind of seeped in to me, as far as like somehow movies and like how things are made with carpentry kind of like somehow got all sucked together. And then that was like, and then my dad was a projectionist when he was in high school, like the old film, bring the film reels on the thing and tie them together.
Movie theater.
Yeah,
that is very interesting. So basically, your dad's curiosity informed. Okay, so basically, my question is, how does your dad curiosity influence you, or basically took you down the path of being a filmmaker?
Well, eventually it got to like early junior high school. I wasn't an economics expert at the time, but I'm certainly not even now. But it got to the point where I think once I started to understand, like, oh, like my parents go out, they have jobs, they earn money, and that money can pay for stuff, the house and stuff. Once I started to get like even just a basic rudimentary idea of that, I'm like, I started finding out, oh, wait a minute, besides of like Harrison Ford and Tom Cruise and all those people in front of the camera, there are people behind the camera, like hundreds of people doing everything. That's their job. Like my dad was a teacher, my mom was in business, and that's their jobs. But then there was people making movies, that was their job. I'm like, that's what I want to do. Like that's I'm not. It was just. I'm not really sure beyond that, Pedro. So
yeah, I mean, if it's a simple answer, it's a simple answer. I'm not gonna hold you against that. Because it makes perfect sense.
Just somehow like just something, my dad took me to see the first Star Wars movie. I was only 3, so I don't necessarily remember that specific event, but obviously I've seen it 1,000 times, and I still remember the first movie theater I saw Return of the Jedi in, and I'm in line, and I'm 9 years old, and I'm talking with people like behind me in line, and I'm like, this is how they make the movies. And so it's just at some point I've forgotten specifically how, but besides of my dad and mom like liking movies and behind the scenes, and my dad loving construction and carpentry and trying to figure things out, it's just somehow like all clicked. I'm like, that's what I want to do. I want to making movies
cool.
My job. So
that's very cool.
And then
that's very cool, because I mean, my experience with my dad, he's a writer. So his curiosity was more talking to people, interviewing, whatnot. But whenever it came to sci-fi and that kind of stuff, he always messed up. For example, my mom told like my dad, like, take the kids to watch Star Wars, and he took us to watch Battle Beyond the Stars. Remember that horrible movie?
Oh yeah.
But the effects started the sense of wonder, like how do people do this? So that's I just picked up on that thing, that you picked the curiosity from your dad, because when you're growing up as a kid, the experiences you get and how you see your parents react to the world basically inform how you view the world. So man, I mean, nice. I like that. I like that a lot, man.
Yeah. It's just I think with all the because my dad would always point out like I said, at construction sites, you always be like, I
Yeah.
wonder what kind of like wood they're using, and somehow all those materials to make a building was like,
Yeah.
like how did they do, like how did they, you know, and then you know this is the 80s, so this is before obviously DVDs and you know special features section where they had behind the scenes, and before I had cable, so it was you know, I remember you know just wondering like, well, how do they do this, and how do they put the music, and how do they like how do they, you know, like how do they do the, I'm always paying attention to like the camera operator with the behind the scenes stuff, and so that all from like the comic books my parents bought me as a kid, and then like early college I got back into buying comic books on my own with my part-time jobs. It was Star Wars Dark Empire that got me. It was actually the sequel series that got me back into it, and then I bought the first series, and that, you know, since then it's, you know, the rest is history, I guess, as they say. But all of what I said, somehow that was meshed all together with, well, I want to, you know, I do videos professionally like weddings and corporate events and sports and things like that, but and you can be creative in those videos, but I'm like, well, I wanted to go to Hollywood and be a director. That was my initial like dream. But that dream is morphed, and not that the dream is dead, but it's kind of morphed into what I do now over the years. And then it got to the point where I'm like, well, you know what? I want to start doing videos again, be creative, like outside of hey Shadowhawk. Do videos outside of like the ones that pay the bills in addition to ones. And then and I took a kind of like a page out of the writer's book that they said like, oh, write what you know. So I'm like, well, there's that idea. So if that's true, like, well, what do I like? What would be one of my first videos? So I'm like thinking, well, you know, I know I love comic books. I've been to a million comic book conventions, and you know, I've made a lot of friends like in the local vendor, you know, like writers and creators and cosplayers. So I'm thinking, well, let's talk because I'm thinking, do people really want to hear me babble on and on about, well, here's how you know, I mean, part of the video was about like, you know, how to do a convention. Well, that's the main crux. And, you know, but I'm thinking, let's talk with the vendors and their side of the table and what they think about conventions and how to record a convention. And so, I don't know if any of that made sense, but
no, I mean it makes perfect sense. As I said, like I live in a country where there are no conventions whatsoever, so I'm very curious on basically put a humane touch to the whole experience, because to me it was all bells and whistles. Like when I heard like, oh, San Diego Comic-Con and whatnot, and you just picture this like huge thing with Hollywood stars, but as I've been entering the community, like I've learned like, okay, like conventions are smelly. Like I didn't know that. And you know, like the vendors, like they don't make that much money because conventions are not that much about comics anymore. So there's like there's like drama, and there's like a story to be told. So that's why I'm very interested in this documentary you're watching. And that's why I asked you before we went live, like, what was the tone you want to accomplish with this documentary? Like, do you want to show it like as a blueprint of what conventions were and what they are now, or just like a guide, like, hey, if you get to a convention, this is what you do and this is what you can find? You know?
It's more the latter, more the, you know, because I you know, called up my vendor friends and said, you know, the questions I asked them, I said, you know, who are, like, what's your name and what's your affiliation? What do you like about cons? How long you've been doing them? And what advice would you give to your fellow, like, what, you know, like, this woman Chelsea, I talked to, she's a cosplayer. I said, what advice would you give to your fellow cosplayers? Or what advice would you give to your fellow writers about doing cons, and what are cons like? And, you know, how do you engage with the people who, you know, yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Great advice. That's a great advice.
That's on the list.
Yeah. So it was like, you know, what do you like about cons? How long have you been doing them? What's your advice? What you know? So and then, you know, future. I want to do probably at least one more volume of this video, but then other things, you know, other videos, comic book related, will also deal with cons about, you know, have they gotten too big? Have they gotten too Hollywood? Is that such a thing? It's, you know, so it's you know, dealing with, you know, what's a, you know, like, I have my sense of cons from the attendees. I've never been a vendor, so I kind of wanted to say, like, well, are people really going to want to hear me babble on and on, about like, oh, okay, stay hydrated and have a budget, and don't forget the indie guys, and the indie comic people, and because I certainly got my fair share of celebrity autographs, and gotten autographs from like George Perez and guys at that level, but I always need to remember to get like my local vendor friends, the reason why I know them is that I've been to their tables and bought stuff from them, and so I had to remember keep some of my budget to not that I'm going to have a budget for everybody, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly.
It's unless I had Bill Gates money, but unfortunately I don't. So
do you remember? Sorry, I was just asked. Do you remember the first con you went to? How old you were? Which con
the first pop culture con I ever went to was a Star Trek convention. I was in high school, 1990. It was up in Manchester, New Hampshire. I was thinking about that the other day. Michael Dorn was the guest star. He played Worf on the Next Generation, and then he was on Deep Space Nine.
Nice.
And then two of the feature films they did of the Next Generation cast, 2 of the 4. He was on Deep Space Nine when when 2 of the movies came out, so they had to write in how he got back on the Enterprise. But that was the first one I ever went to. That was I was 16, but it was really, I'm like, oh, there are other people who love this stuff, and we all get together, and it's there's no judgment. It's a judgment-free zone, and it's cool to walk around, and I was 16, so it was obviously socially awkward, probably like a lot of 16-year-olds are, and but it was fun to walk around. Obviously, my parents had to drive me. Obviously, I didn't have my license at the time, but it was fun to walk around and talk to people and be like, "Oh, what do you think about this? And what do you think about that?" And so that was the first time I ever went. And then started going to, early 2000s. Started going to the Boston show, and then but Massachusetts here we have a whole number of cons, and I'm close enough to Rhode Island where I go to the Rhode Island one, and then there's a couple of cons in the Granite State Comic Con up in New Hampshire. I go to that one. So so first one was back in 1990. That was and then been going ever since.
So Chris actually makes a good point here, or he has a comment which leads me to a question. Chris says, when I attended the San Diego Comic-Con a few times, I found it severely lacking to do with anything with actual comic books. Both times I attended were for video games and television shows. So I know you said the first con you went to was the Star Trek convention, so obviously not a comic book convention, but was there any sort of noticeable differences between that first con, in terms of the way they've changed over the years, in terms of, your first con till, the one you've went to recently? Are they wildly different or no?
A little bit different. Yeah. It's the, I think there have been a lot more, well, I think the bigger shows, and this is not to criticize the bigger, when I say bigger, I mean, as far as number of attendees, not necessarily quality, but the bigger shows in my area, have a lot, I walked around the last few years, and I'm like, oh, there's an exercise company here, and there's 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 this company or that company, and or it's 18, a phone server there, I'm like
Verizon.
Verizon
selling
Captain America phone cases or something, right?
Yeah. So it's and I don't mind some of the the selling Legos, or I don't mind some of the vendors, but it's and one of the bigger shows in my area, they have a ton of celebrities. Nothing wrong with celebrities.
Yeah.
And I've certainly, like I said before, I've certainly gotten my fair share of celebrity autographs, but it's I think it's a lot more celebrity. I almost feel like one of the comments that San Diego con feel has certainly kind of almost made its way east, I feel. So and I kind of have to realize, okay, my budget, I want to I go for the comic books, and that's not meant to look at me, I'm awesome. Just I kind of feel like
it's interested in,
I feel like a lot more, with the bigger shows. I think and over the last few years, especially in Massachusetts, there have been a lot more smaller one-day shows that have popped up. Like one of my friends, Keith Gleason from Mighty Mascots from
Yes.
he runs a one-day show called Plastic City Comic-Con, and that's he tries to keep that. So there have been a lot of one-day shows that have popped up that are trying not to have like a huge number of celebrities or like all the like the cell phone carriers or so it's I think it's changed a little bit. But I mean
from a point of view, I understand the whole like magnetic appeal of having celebrities at your con, but the people who are coming for the celebrities might not buy the comic book, so maybe at some point it starts to become a moot point having like big celebrities, unless they're pertaining to a comic book IP, maybe. But just like, okay, here's the new Game of Thrones. Okay, I know S. Miller made a comic book or The Hedge Knight a couple of years back, but there's no real like Game of Thrones comic book to promote. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. A lot of people talk about that. I know exactly. Actually, there's in Connecticut, Mohican Sun. Mohican Sun is forgot what the word, but it hosts one of the bigger Connecticut shows it hosts, and I've met the guy who runs it. I've met him in person and seen him on other shows, and he tries to get when he gets celebrities, like he has a lot of good like comic book related people, but there are like direct like creators and writers and artists that are directly related. But his celebrity, he makes it a point to, if he does, and he has a ton of celebrities there, but he makes it. He tries to get them. He tries to get them that are like some kind of comic book connection.
Yeah.
Like three of the celebrities have already been booked that they've announced were voice actors on the G.I. Joe animated show in the 80s. So that's I guess somewhat comic book related. So he tries to make them, somewhat comic book related. So and to answer, is it Chris Fisk? Hey Adam, I haven't recorded anything at Plastic City yet, but they're having Plastic City this July, so I'm gonna get some footage there.
Awesome.
And then I think Chris Fisk said something. One of his comments, he said he didn't realize there was a con in New Hampshire. There is, there's one in Manchester in September. I think it's like the third weekend in September called Granite State Comic-Con. So look that up. It's a good it's like kind of like a
very nice.
Like it's not a huge show, but it's not like it's big enough where like I think like Kevin Eastman's been there a few times. And
give me just 1 second. Hey, Pale. There's my mom. Just saying. Okay,
say hola.
Go ahead. Say hola, Pale.
No, I've
hi, Papa. Sorry, it's like stop talking about me. Yeah, I will. Sorry, Mom.
In the back of my mind for like, I don't know, maybe a month or two, I've been sort of, which is kind of, I guess maybe serendipitous is the word, that you put out a project like you have. I've been sort of kicking around the idea of doing a one-day show myself. There's no, we used to have a comic convention. It was very, very small, and it ran for like, I think maybe 5 years. I live in Panama City, Florida, which it isn't it's not a particularly big city really. But we had a con called Creative Con, and I can't remember any guests that were ever any like big draw, but I think the biggest thing that they had was they had one of the original TARDISes from Doctor Who, like somehow shipped out here to Florida. So yeah, but they haven't done that, and it's probably been 5 years or so. So I'm not sure ultimately when it ended up happening, but there's a couple good spots around here. There's a couple like really fancy hotels out on the beach where they have a convention center at the bottom where they host stuff. So
sure, yeah,
might
be possible to do Florida Man Con one day. Might have you come film it.
I love the name.
Yeah, that's Ginge and Florida Man are kind of my branded trademarks. But anyways, enough about me here. So let's play this trailer here, if that's all right.
Let's do it.
Sure, yeah.
Just kind of get into it here.
What do do I like about con? What don't I like about cons?
Can you hear?
My name is
Yeah.
Stephen Lomer.
Okay.
I'm an author, and I'm associated with Port9 Publishing.
Approach people as they're walking by, talk to them, call them over, ask them if they'd like to see what you've worked on. Hello, I am Ben Goldsmith, writer of comic books and con goer.
I've been going to conventions for probably 20 years or so. I mean, the benefits are you make a lot of great friends, vendors and customers.
Hey, I know that
You make a lot of
Sasquatch.
people happy when you sell good stuff.
My name's Josh, and I work at Rubber Chicken Comics in Bellingham, Massachusetts on the weekends.
I don't know, just pick a character that you identify with, that maybe from your youth or maybe from a recent movie or media of some type. And
Does look fun.
and put your own take on it. My name is Chelsea Von Chastity. I am a cosplayer from Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
Hey, I'm Johnny C. I'm a comic book creator, producer, content creator, convention host, and MC. What do people like about going to football games? You know, it's like you're kind of amongst your people, your fans communing to experience and indulge in what you love the most. So.
That's kind of a rough cut of the trailer, so I can remember to.
Dude, it works. It works. I like it. I mean, it's shedding light on basically the backdrop of the vendor, which is something that I haven't seen yet. So I'm very interested, man.
Yeah, I think it's it was. I tried to pick a couple of writers and if I do one more volume, I'll pick a couple of artists and maybe I'll talk to Keith Gleason and get his views on what's like to run a show.
Yeah.
Because
I think it's good to have if I can hop in. I think it's good to have a vendor's perspective as well, because I'm not sure, maybe you can say who this is kind of geared to, but for me, I see it useful being able to get inside of the vendor's point of view, so that way you can make sure that you set up the show properly and kind of just have the more is obviously the better in that in that regard.
It's kind of meant to do a few things, and it's so hopefully people will definitely get different things out of it. So it's and then I went to a few cons, like I said, Plastic City this summer. I'll get some footage from there, and then it's always I think this is probably an occupational hazard. Every video I do, I'm like, oh, I wish I had done that. I wish, or if you're doing any kind of a documentary, a friend of mine teaches full time, but he does documentaries on the side, and he's always, whenever he's like always, I talked about The Breakfast once a few years ago and kind of picked his brain. He's like, come up with questions and an outline, but at the same time expect things to go, and things are always going to come up. They're like, oh, I didn't think of that. So, and I'm always like, oh, I wish I had done that. I wish I'd gotten that shot or asked that question. So, yeah, it's things are, always come up as far as, so I guess a few different things. I don't know if that answers your question, but a few different things of getting a good perspective on, and I think what I wanted to do was have them give specific answers enough, but not I didn't want to say anything good or bad or either way about specific conventions, because I talked with, off camera, I've talked with these people, friends of mine a lot, and they're like, oh man, I went to that con, or, it was like tumbleweeds, or I went to that con, it was busy, or, so it's, every
can't really
con,
be talking shit on your Indiegogo camera project. That makes sense. Okay.
So, but it's every, every convention is, different, and it's, I realize different people go for different reasons to a convention. So, but it's, it's generally the whole pop culture thing. And it's, once I started going to cons, getting back to your question about how I started with cons, it's, once I started going to cons, it took me a year or two to realize oh, wait a minute, I could bring books to get signed by people. George Perez is there, or whoever's there. Oh, I have books from that person, and they can, and it's interesting to stand in line waiting to see, whoever, Jimmy Palmiotti or whoever, and it's you're there the people in front of you are there along with you, generally for the convention, but specifically to see, get an autograph from a creator. So it's interesting to see. Like, it's always interesting to see what books, like from whoever's, from whoever you're getting, Bernie Wrightson or whoever you're getting signed. Like, what books did that person bring? Because inevitably, I've always found that I always bring books that the person has done, but it's not really, a lot of times not famous for. So it's always interesting to see, like, what other books did other people bring to get signed. So that's always a fun part for me. So,
Very cool.
anyway,
So let's kind of go over the campaign a little bit.
Sure.
So we've got perks here. So you're doing
Sorry,
this on
not
a
quite.
flash drive, right?
yeah.
Good,
There's
Pedro.
I was trying to think. I'm like, gosh, should I send? I can always add, maybe certain perks. I can always, like, I can add a hard copy of it. If someone wants a hard copy to bring with them. I do. There is a digital download perk, I believe. But yeah, there's the flash drive version, and I did. I think in all of as far as the shipping parts, I did say the U.S. But now that I'm on this, now that I'm on this show, I'll ship, especially at the hard copies or a flash drive. I'll ship anywhere. So don't worry about that. If you want the files on a flash drive, I'll ship it to wherever you are. So, but yeah,
Nice.
so this is the travel version. And I was trying to think of, like, yeah, I had a few local artist friends of mine come up, because there's an intro to each of the 3 episodes that I didn't put in the trailer, that kind of in like 20 seconds kind of explains my history of, like, I grew up reading comics and I watched the TV shows, and that's supposed to be me in the chair watching the show. So Frankie B. Washington did that artwork
Very
right there.
nice.
So it's the print is one of the perks there, and so that will be I can ship those anywhere. So it's because I was trying to think, like, well, what would people want? What kind of perks would? It's my first campaign, so I'm sure I'm sure there's 100 things that I could change about it. So thinking, well, what would people want in a video? Obviously, the actual video itself, but besides that, trying to think of, like, I did some little bit of research on other videos on Indiegogo and Kickstarter, and try to see, like, what perks do they, so I try to combine, like, well, some people do prints, some people do stickers, and bookmarks, things like that. So I figured, well, maybe do like a poster and do like a, offer the, and then I think the highest perk right now I have is the executive producer perk. So I figured, I'm like, well, that'd be kind of fun, because I'm always watching movies and there's, like, 18 different executive producers. I'm like, huh? Do they really have 18 different executive producers? How does that work? But somebody probably just contributed some money and said,
Yeah.
Yeah, that is the age-old question: is what the hell do they do? But that seems to be the answer.
Yeah,
Money.
because he was, nothing against Stan Lee, but, like, Stan Lee was obviously Stan Lee more understandable, but he was like an executive producer when he was alive on every movie, and I'm like, okay, well, did he work on the movie? It sounded like, but not just Stan Lee, but anybody, like, what did they do? So
I think Stan gets a pass, but your point
Yeah.
still remains. Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
yeah.
Guys, there's a huge dog mosh pit outside my house right now, so I'm going for 2 minutes. I'll be
God.
Sure.
Alrighty, interesting. Okay, so could you talk a little bit about sort of what are kind of the top 3 tips for a new somebody getting into filming conventions for the first time? Kind of like what are the top 3 just tips, I suppose. Yeah. What do you have for us?
Well, probably the first tip is more like a general tip. Go in with a plan. Like, what do you like? What's your what do you want to get shots of? What do you want to get video clips of? So kind of have like you don't necessarily need to write it down, but you can. But have an idea of, like, do I want to get shots of indies, of creators, of things like that. think first probably look up at the convention and see. I know one of the bigger conventions in the New England area, they have you apply, and they ask about certain like social media followers and how many you have and this and that. And one of my friends is really big in the local area. I had him as a college student actually way back when, and so he's gotten
Very
to
nice.
interview a lot of like celebrities and stuff. He's gotten really well known. So I think like have a plan as to like what kind of because it's, I think with any video project, it's you can tailor to, like, you need to tailor to what you're what you're getting. So and then check on whether the convention needs you to register first, or because some of the bigger ones do. But and then I think
Would you probably just get kicked out, like if you just without the what is it, like a license or something, essentially, like filming illegally? Get the hell out of here.
And I think probably the biggest tip is, when you like some of the shots that you see in the trailer, and in the 3-part videos, you'll see like close-ups of people and doing their work, and B-roll basically. I think probably just the biggest tip I would have is just when you want to get footage of somebody's table, go up to them and I don't know if this is any like a super genius like idea, but I came up with, but just go up to the person and say like who you are, just talk to them, say who you are and what you want to do, and ask them like, can I get some, shots of your table, and especially if cosplayers are walking down like the aisles, if you want to get a shot of them, footage of them, ask them like, here's who I am, and like have come up with some business cards, even if you don't necessarily run a business, like come up with cards. I mean, just go to Vista printers, staples, you can get 100 for an inexpensive price, and just have them, you don't have to come up with a whole like LLC company, but so I think the biggest tip is to just ask, and probably you're probably not going to be able to at first go up to a celebrity and without asking first, and just be like, hey, hey Mark Hamill, how's it going? You probably have to get permission first, but just walk around to tables and and tell them what you're doing and who you are. And so I don't know if those are revolutionary tips, but
So no, actually the point about a business card, that's actually something that to me wasn't sort of like jumping right out at me. So that is like, it's a small little tip that I'm sure lots of people do already and have thought of, but it is a useful, just like something to literally have in your back pocket. You know what I mean? Like a business card. So I sort of have a question, but I'm struggling with, is this a compulsion because I'm a writer? Did the idea of doing this in a book form, obviously it's a video, it's about a video, videography, but is there any idea of like a way for you to do this in a book form? Because I'm a like I said, I'm a writer, but I love guidebooks, I love handbooks, and I love referring to them when in need. Is that anything that you thought of at all?
I hadn't, but now that you mentioned it, I'm like, that's actually not all that bad of it. That's a really good idea. I don't know, that came out bad, but no, it's I hadn't, but I'm like, that's a really good idea. So because I was almost gonna get in touch with you, and I'm like, okay, it's obviously a video, but I'm like, that's a good idea, putting out a book. So yeah, I'm not sure how I would go about that, but that's definitely something. Yeah, I'd be interested to.
The cool thing about doing it in video form is, as you film, have somebody with a DSLR taking like high-res pictures.
Yeah.
So basically, you have a blueprint to inform like the redaction of it. Like that would be a very nice like companion thing. Maybe not for this campaign, because I mean you're already in the middle of it, but for future things. And I mean, now that we're talking ideas, it's something that's bopping in my head. Maybe making a documentary of the reality of LCSs today, on how they're looking at the future without DC or Marvel. Like, how will they navigate a post Diamond world? Like that would be very interesting too.
Yeah. Actually, I just, my local comic shop I was shopping at for about 7 years closed down in the last couple of years, and then one of the guys who I first met who was helping them out, when I first started shopping there, opened his own shop. He actually signed the lease on March 1st of 2020. I'm like,
Oh,
I'm like, oh man,
that's rough.
But he ended up, but he's jokes. He's like, well, we had plenty of time to renovate the store. So, and then they opened up in the summer and they're still there. And the summer of 2020, they opened up. So, and I did a video on them and then did a just, a short, like 1 year anniversary, like 4 or 5 minute long clip. And I'd done a video on the store that I had shopped at before because they were moving from like the smaller store on one end of the shopping area to the bigger store. So I have done like short highlight videos of comic book stores, but I'm like thinking, what, that's another good idea. So
yeah, I kind of have to agree. Actually, that would be a. I've actually just sort of fallen down a YouTube documentary rabbit hole of just whatever random nonsense sounds interesting, but yeah, that would absolutely be something I would click on. You know what I mean? Just it's an interesting how are comic shops doing? Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah, that's I will add that to the list. That's a good idea. So,
do you see a lot of indie comics in your local shop? Like aside from Image stuff, is there any sort of like more sort of true to life indie creators locally?
Yeah, there is. The shop I shopped at before it closed down, they had a good size section. Actually, that's how I ended up finding out about Alterna, because they had I think Peter Cimetti, one of the second or third like local like shop appearance was Peter Cimetti, and that's how I met him. So yeah, they had a good the local shop I have now. He definitely wants to increase his indie section beyond I guess beyond Image, but yeah, he has a good thing, and it's just it's tough because I still look through the previews book every now and then. I'm like, oh man, like how do indies do it? But I'm like, yeah, he definitely does he definitely loves indie books.
Very nice.
And I bought certainly a fair number of indies books and series from him. So he does have a good section of it. So
I think Chris makes a couple salient points here. When I worked in Japan, business cards were so integral to business that there's even a ritual in how you give and receive them when you meet new associates.
Yeah.
And he's got another one here. Most local comic shops I'm aware of have changed businesses from comic books to Magic the Gathering, play spaces, and Funko Pop vendors, or went out of business. Now, that's actually very true of here. We had 3 comic shops for a good long while, and one of them got destroyed in a hurricane, and they just never reopened. Another one got destroyed in that same hurricane, but did reopen. But the 2 that are still remaining, they have a comic book wall, and one of them actually, like several years ago, stopped carrying DC altogether. It's either DC or Marvel, I forget which one, but yeah, there was like some big stink with Diamond. I think this was like 2018, and he just quit carrying them. But but they're mostly there's a lot of Magic that goes on there, but it's also huge for D&D. Like the one that doesn't carry whichever of the big 2, like that's kind of their bread and butter, is like Warhammer and like D&D. They've got this big ass tavern room, and it's like that's kind of where the money's at, I think, for a lot of those guys.
Yeah, I love walking around comic book stores. So whenever I'm going to a video gig on the way, I'll leave like an hour earlier and see if there's a shop nearby. And especially when I do videos on there's a wedding videography company on Cape Cod, and I'm kind of near Cape Cod, like in Massachusetts. So it's I don't know if any of you have ever been to Cape Cod, but if you have, you know what Cape Cod, getting stuck in Cape Cod traffic is like. It's worse than regular traffic jams. But so whenever I do an event on Cape Cod, pretty much between Memorial Day and Labor Day, I always leave a few hours earlier because it's getting stuck in Cape Cod traffic. Just for future reference, in case anybody has never been to Cape Cod and you plan on going, whatever time you want to leave, you say like, oh, we'll leave at this time, we'll be fine. Leave like 3 hours earlier. So
all right.
Just as advice, but I try to walk around. I say all that to say I try to walk around a couple of comic shops every now and then, especially when I go to the Cape, because I get down there. If I beat the traffic, I'm there like 5 hours early. I'm like, all right, what do I do? What do I do now? But it's always interesting to see like what comic books, what comic shops sell beyond comic books, and it's the store I'm shopping at now doesn't have a huge selection of like pops, Funko Pops, and toys, and I think he purposely does. Not that he has anything against toys, but it's like, okay, how many statues do I sell? And that's always been kind of in the back of my mind, like interesting, like, well, like how do from a business, because I've never run a comic shop before, so I'm always wondering like, well, how do they make that decision of like, well, how much card games am I going to sell, and how much this am I going to sell, and toy, the ephemera beyond the books. So
I think it would be really interesting, especially if you could get enough kind of like to speak to enough shop owners that are kind of willing to just be honest about everything. You know what I mean? I think you could put together it would be anecdotal, but I mean, it'd be enough information to where you could probably sort of get a little, kind of temperature test as to what's going on out there. But Chris, Sugar Chris makes a good point. Yeah, every hobby shop I know of are Magic the Gathering, tabletop, and video games right now. There's barely, if any, comics in them. I know of one comic shop about 45 minutes away, and one that's a couple hours. Yeah, it's a shame.
I like the fact that you're trying to do like an objective flashlight on the hobby itself, and that's sorely needed right now. So yeah, man, like congrats! Like this is an awesome project, man.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's I mean, just that comic book shop. If for no other reason, I would love to do that local comic shop video just for my own. Find out my own information. Like, oh, like that's because I've always wanted to know. Like I said, I always wanted to know like how do they come up with? Not that I need to know their like like the inner workings of
their accounting.
Yeah, but
I want to read your books.
Yeah,
I want to see your books now.
But yeah, I figure out like, well, what do I collect? Like, why do I go to a local comic shop? So it's
interesting.
The whole experience of I remember I lived in Canada for a couple of years, and one of the things that was new, alien, and I did every week was going to a comic book shop and just like speak with the guys, like, hey, what's good what's good this week, all that good stuff. That's something that maybe you guys take for granted, but down here we only have hobby shops, and if you want to buy comic books, you have to order them online. Like there are no, if you're a fan of comic books down here, you're really a fan because there's no access.
Dang.
So yeah, dude,
it was like that with Gundam down here for, I mean, not quite as dramatic or sort of life-threatening, I suppose, but yeah, like there was a good stretch of time where it was like 5 or 6 years ago, me and a group of friends hopped in like a soccer mom van my buddy owned, and we hit every spot we could think of in the local area, just looking for Gundam models, and we ended up, nobody had them, and we ended up going to a really like boutique and very small RC plane and like a plane and train, very old school hobby store, and it was cool seeing like my great grandpa's hobbies, you know what I mean, like on display and still alive, but no Gundams, sadly. So,
are you talking about Gunpla?
Yeah, but just whatever. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of them like in my town. Now they're actually like you can go to Walmart and find them, but they're all Book a Million, the bookstore. They're a lot more easier to get a hold of. Anyways, so I do have another sort of documentarian question. And it's just kind of a general one. Do you have a favorite documentarian? Do you have a favorite documentary that really stands out to you?
I mean, obviously, the biggest one is probably Ken Burns, but I think that's probably because he has the biggest name. But like I love his I think it was his first documentary, the Brooklyn Bridge. He did a video on. Like that's big. Like Robert Kirkland's Secret History of Comic Books. I love that. That was a pretty decent series. So it's then a couple of friends of mine, they do documentaries, so they're kind of my favorites too. But it's like I'm watching the baseball one. I love baseball anyway, so watching Burns's a comic topic pops. How's it going?
Pops Vincent. What's up, sir? Coming
So yeah,
up
probably
as a
I'd
guest.
say Ken Burns probably.
Hmm.
But I think that's true because he probably has the biggest names. It's just yes, it's the storytelling because it's so probably Burns and
Ken Burns has a really wide interest and covers a lot of like really, sort of lots of like tragic stuff, but I mean, it's also really interesting. I think he's got some Civil War stuff. I think he's got some Wild West stuff. I know he did the Dust Bowl. Let's see.
Yeah.
Chris Fisk says, here in New England, we had Mr. Big's Toyland in Waltham, Massachusetts. That place has had Mecca and Japanese imports since the 70s. Check out its commercial on YouTube sometime. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet.
It's
Very nice.
yeah, and there's another actually in that same town, there's another comic book store that I've gotten some back issues from, and yeah, they have like the inventory. They have they have a lot of comic books, but they also have a lot of like old TV guides and like just a lot of like old like Beatles magazines and like old novels like the back in like the early 90s when like the Timothy Zahn trilogy, like I think it was Bantam books when those books were coming out. He has a lot of used books like that, so he has a lot of so it's
I mean, Star Wars was, I mean, it's hard to really specify, I think. It's in terms of like what was my first love, but it's either comic books or Star Wars. But if you held a gun to my head, I think it would be Star Wars. Now, that being said, like I've pretty much have gone through a brutal divorce over like the latest, like the Disney Star Wars movies. I've checked out and it wasn't pleasant, but Star Wars to me was huge. Like I've spent so much time in that universe, and I was wondering if you played any of the Dark Forces games, or more like the Jedi Knight, Jedi Academy. Did you ever play any Star Wars games?
I haven't. I haven't played. Yeah, I haven't played a lot of those games. I should probably get into them because I ended up liking the. I guess short answer is I have not, but I think kind of like you, like it's certain opinions on the sequel trilogy, and I've liked a lot of the Star Wars Rebels and Star Wars Clone Wars TV shows more than the movies, the latest round, and the Mandalorian, a couple of seasons of those. I love those more than than the certain parts of the sequel trilogy I liked, but it's just like I still think they should. I was talking with my comic book store owner about that Timothy Zahn trilogy, the Thrawn trilogy. I'm like, they should have adapted that. They should. I don't know, or somebody should have adapted that. I mean, I don't know if Disney would have done a great job of it, but
the thing is like not going to that topic that much because that's still an open wound for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were just focusing on we need new stories so we don't pay royalties to anyone. And that was the whole thing. It was like, oh no, this is a new Star Wars. But yeah, your new Star Wars suck.
I mean, in the grand scheme of things, the royalties could not have been worth, or couldn't have been like equal to the amount of money potentially lost over these movies. You know what I mean? Like the royalties, maybe. I mean, I have no idea how they specify who's going to get what, but I don't know. It seems like those royalties are looking pretty good right about now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think they had the money for it. I don't think they're suffering.
Like Lucas sold, but he still had a foot in with all his intellectual property.
Yeah.
So that's why they want to get rid of the original 3. That's why they canonized the. I mean, the things like Legends was never canon, but dude, it was an awesome research to just see where you could take Star Wars, and they completely like overlooked it. Oh, that means we have to pay royalties to the writers. Like it was completely an economic decision, and it shows. Because the new movies suck.
Yeah.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Say anything.
Okay, so we're actually coming up to about an hour here. So Ara, is there anything else you want to tell us about your project, buddy? Is there anything we didn't cover?
Not really. I think we pretty much covered everything. It's just I love telling stories. I think that's probably the other main reason why I love storytelling and I love telling stories. That's the main reason. Another reason why I ended up wanting to go into the film world, and it's interesting to do documentaries. Like it's interesting to do like scripted fictional like like a movie, and then a documentary. Like they both have their certain fantastic ways about them. It's interesting to do a documentary. So I hope people, when they watch this video, they back it, they learn a lot. I certainly learned a lot myself working, not just how to do a documentary, but also learned a lot from the interviews of my friends. Even though the people I talked to I'd known for years already, I learned a lot. So it's I hope anybody who backs this will learn as much as I did. So
I like it, and I actually, that kind of leaves you on a thought. It's like, how much do you you might have like a best friend, but you might not ever really talk about what they do for a living. So it's like you don't know that aspect of their lives. So yeah, very interesting. Guys, definitely back this. It's a handbook.
please.
It's also a video book. It's a video, not a video game. I almost stumbled into that, but it looks very interesting. And ours put a lot of great work into this, and certainly for anybody looking to maybe put on a con, or maybe from a vendor's perspective, there's a lot to learn here. So with that, Ara, we're gonna bump you to the back, buddy. Thank you for joining us.
all right.
Thank you so much, Ara.
Yep. Sorry. Yeah, we do that. It's always a game. Sorry, I feel like I should warn my guests. I know.
Horrible.
It's
Horrible,
okay, sorry.
James.
Or if you, he left. No, but I didn't tell him to wait.
You see?
Okay.
You see?
Okay, let's just say goodbye to the chat then. All right, so we had Pops Van Zant come by. Pops Van
What's up,
Zant.
Pops?
Thanks for coming by, sir. He's going to be a guest next month, I believe, or maybe in a couple weeks. I have to check the schedule. Next Sunday is Neo Star or Riser Man. He goes by a couple different names. He's got the greatest intros in the biz. Let's see. Thanks to Chris Fisk for hanging out. Thanks to Sugar Chris. Thanks for Past Master Dan, Pale Rider, Pops, of course, and CromCon 23s rocking and rolling. And Pedro will be on later. So how about that?
Yeah.
Pedro, you've done something on Pops's book. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. I'm working on a trailer for the Cromniverse, and I've already finished the rough animations. They have been approved, so I'm starting with cleanup on that one.
Very nice.
So, yeah,
excellent.
Very exciting. Exciting times.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you for joining us on another lovely Sunday, and we will catch y'all next time on the Ginge and Pedro Show.
Let's do that.
Peace.
Hey. What happened now? The Ginge just booted out and left me here all alone. So I could, I don't know, tell you guys to back tropical magics maybe. I don't know. What, Ginge, what's your plan? Ginge, come back. I'm nervous now. What's Whew. Okay, so the Ginge and Pedro show minus Ginge. It's better if you guys leave because I don't know what to do right now. This is kind of weird. Yeah, dude. Okay, guys. I'm gonna leave too because I'm just gonna make an ass out of myself. Have an awesome Sunday. Take care and see you next Sunday, probably on this same stream. Ginge, what are you doing? Okay, see you guys. Bye.